Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to answer few questions regarding lab number 2 from HTTP request smuggling vulnerability module. So I received few questions in the comment section. The first question is why we do post request for 404 and also why we always change request method. The second question from the same guy asking explain why we get error like timeout and bad request, which server decline request, backend or front end, and what type of error we get. So I could have answered these questions in the comment itself, but I think it's better to demonstrate it, and I think these questions cover everything in the lab. So I will explain it one more time and try to make it more clear. Now this is the lab, and here we have all the requests. Without wasting time, let's jump to the web root request. This is the request. I'm gonna send this request to the repeater and go back to the repeater. So send this request again. Everything is fine. Now you can see here this is HTTP protocol version 2. So the first thing I would like to do is going to the request attribute within the inspector section and degrade or downgrade the HTTP version from version 2 to 1. You can see it's now converted into 1.1. Second thing, I will go to the setting button and I will turn off the update content length, because in HTTP request smuggling most of the time you want the custom content length according to what you are trying to do. Fine. Now to make it more easy, I don't want the rush here, so I will just delete all those headers and I will add here a few headers like content type header, and the value of the content type is gonna be application /x www form URL encoded. Okay, and the content length, so I will type the content length later. The fourth header I need is transfer encoding, and the value of it is chunked. Fine. Now why we need here the post request, or the request method is post, because get request cannot bring or cannot contain the data in the body section. That's why we need here post method. Okay, because in get request, if you want to pass any information, you have to pass it within the URL as an endpoint or within the query strings. Fine, as the value of the parameters and all. But in the post request, you can specify the data within the body section. So that's why we need to change the request method from get to post. This is the first thing. Second thing, now I need to check out whether the front end is using transfer encoding or not. Okay, and for that purpose, let's see, I'm gonna put here chunk size, which is 4, and I'm gonna put the data within the chunk is ASDF, let's say, and another chunk I will put here, let's say 8. Okay, and for the data of this chunk 8, I'm not gonna specify any data. Okay, so this is the thing. Now if you want to put here the content length, so let's see, I'm gonna put here the content length of 7. Okay, for only this chunk. Okay, and its data. So now let's see, what if I send the request. If I send the request, it will go first of all handled by the front end server, and the front end server, because it's using transfer encoding, or let's say we don't know whether it's using transfer encoding or content length, but if it's using transfer encoding, so because transfer encoding is chunked, so it will read the first chunk, and the chunk size is in hexadecimal. Make sure the content length value is in bytes and the chunk size for the transfer encoding is in hexadecimal. So it will see the size, first size, which is 4, and then it will read the data. So once it read the data, it say, okay, this chunk is fine, I read the data, and it moved to the second chunk. Now the chunk size is 8, which is valid hexadecimal number or value. Now it will try to read this 8 hexadecimal value data. Okay, but here we do not specify any data of this chunk size, so that's why it will say, okay, read timeout, because I try to read, I try to get the data, but I did not find, so read timeout. So make sure whenever you see this error, read timeout, that means your chunk size is not matched with the data. Fine. Now let's see, I would like to show you something, maybe you know it, I hope you all know it. So the hexadecimal basically starts from 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then instead of 10, because it's not decimal, it will go to A, then 11 is B, 12 is C, D, E, and F. So F is 15. Fine. So if you count it from 0, it become you will find 16. That's why the base value of the hexadecimal is 16. Like binary have only 2, 0 and 1, hexadecimal has from 0 to F. Fine. That means F is also the genuine value or genuine representation of hexadecimal. Now let's see, instead of 8, if I try to provide here some hexadecimal chunk size that is actually invalid hexadecimal, let's say V, and send the request again. So you can see invalid request. Why invalid request? Because front end server, and this also confirms that the front end server is using chunked transfer encoding. Okay, because the front end server is trying to read all the chunks. So it read first chunk, that is okay. Now it's trying to read the second chunk, but the hexadecimal value of that chunk is invalid. So it will say invalid request. Fine. Similarly, if you try to put here another chunk, and the value of that chunk, let's say you put AAA, and next you give any invalid chunk size, which is, let's say, L or K or whatever you want. So invalid request. Fine. So that means the front end server is using chunk encoding. And whenever, let's say, if I give the chunk size 3, but I did not provide the data of that chunk, and I send the request, so you will find here read timeout. Okay, so this is the thing, and it proves or verifies that the front end server is using transfer encoding. Now let's talk about backend server. So for backend server, let's see, I'm going to use here 0, because the front end server is using transfer encoding, we know it. So what if 0 means if you provide the chunk size 0, okay, that means the message ends here. And now if we try to provide here another value, let's say anything, data is equal to 1, okay, and did not provide here anything. So if you give this value, let's say data is equal to 1, it's 6, and let's say I'm just going to send the request to see what we get. So once front end server handle this request, because it's interpreting transfer encoding, it will see the chunk size 0, and it will say, okay, the message ends here, and it will drop this one. So it will not consider this part of the request. Fine. And once it goes to the backend server will see there are 7 bytes, so it will try to read extra bytes, and it will wait for it. And if it does not receive anything, it will say communication timeout. And that is showing us that the backend server is using content length. So now we have verified that the front end server is using transfer encoding and the back end server is interpreting content length request header. So the vulnerability exists in that application is TE.CL. Now to exploit that, what we need here is chunk size. Let's say anything in the hex. We will specify the exact hexadecimal value of the chunk later. I want to again put here the post request. Why post request? Because the request need to contain some data which is possible with the post request, and I want to specify any endpoint here or anything, HTTP version 1.1, and then I need host header, I need content type, and I need content length. Now you may ask the question, why don't we put here transfer encoding? Because we already verified that the vulnerability exists is TE.CL and the backend server does not interpret transfer encoding, it only interprets content length, so no need for the transfer encoding. Next thing, we need to put some data in the post request, and the data, I would say data is equal to 1 or whatever you want, or q, anything. Then I need to put here to terminate the message, I will say 0. Okay, and I put some trailing of the new lines. And now if you want to see how exactly the content length of it, it's always better to start with the bottom so that you can specify this content length, then hexadecimal value of that chunk, and then this content length. So for that purpose, if you just highlight data is equal to 1, you can see there are 6 bytes of content length, but I will say okay, try to read 15 bytes of it or 10 bytes of it. Then for the hexadecimal value of the chunk, from data is equal to 1 up to the post, you can see this is the byte representation, so that means 167 bytes in this chunk, but I need to mention it in hexadecimal, so the value is A7. So instead of hex, I will put here A7. Now if I hover my cursor here from A7 up to the starting of the post, because if I just highlight A7, you can see the byte size is 2. But what I want to mention that the second request is start with the post. So I need to highlight here up to the starting of the post, and the byte size is 4. If you even not understand like this, you can click on this /n new line representation button. So you can see these are the trailing sequence of the new line. So if you highlight this up to the new line, you can see this is 4. That's why. And if you do not turn on this one, so you make sure that you highlight up to the starting of the post, which is 4. So I'm going to put here post. So in this request, exact content length you need to mention. So the exact content length is 4. That means A7 up to here. Now just send the request. And one more thing, I would like to take one more genuine normal request to the repeater. Okay, now if I go to the inspect, and also make sure you downgrade this HTTP protocol to version 1.1, send the request 200. Okay, fine. Back to the first one, which is the smuggled request. Now if I send the request, you can see 200. Okay, this comes from the front end server. Now send this request. This is the genuine request one more time, and I am expecting 200. Okay, but here you got not found. Why? Because of this one. Fine. If you send the request first, it will say 200. Okay. If you send the request one more time, it will say 400 not found. Why? Because first, once the request goes to the front end server, it say okay chunk, and the chunk size is A7, which is up to here. Okay, so it will send this request to the backend server. Okay, so make sure this complete chunk goes up to the backend. So once the backend server interpret this request as another request, it will see the content length, which is 15. So the exact content length is not 15, less than 15. So it will try to see, or it will try to accept or wait for rest of the data. Okay, and I think that's it for this video. I hope everything is clear. If you have any query, please put your query in the comment section. I will try to respond it as soon as possible. See you in the next video. Bye.